this view is everything. Shit, I could get used to this. That's right. You can see a lot more when you're standing on the top floor and stuff.
It's very important that I give you the secret to the camp system of negotiation and the actual foundation anchor for everything we do in our negotiation system. All of you are aware and remember Thomas Edison and his great contributions to society. And I want to tell you a story about Thomas Edison and the light bulb. For the last 25 years, I've asked the question of audiences literally all over the world, who invented the light bulb? And just about everyone that responded in the audience would say, well, Thomas Edison, of course. Well, it's interesting. Thomas Edison didn't invent the light bulb. He refined it and improved it with his team. What he actually did was he purchased the rights to the light bulb from a Scotsman, who he then hired to come onto his team to continue the research and development of the light bulb. So I asked the question, why did Thomas Edison buy the light bulb? And invariably the audience would respond, well, he wanted to sell light bulbs. Well, wait a minute. There was no electrical industry at the time. It was just experiments here and there. So why did Thomas Edison buy the light bulb? What drove him to make that decision? Peter Drucker, in his great work, wrote a book called Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And in there, he talks about Edison's mission and purpose. Now, when I began coaching, I started really studying mission and purpose, and of course, I needed a definition. So I want to share with you a definition of mission and purpose. And this really is the most powerful concept I'm ever going to help you try to discover. It's the long-term aim. It's defined in the dictionary as long-term aim, continuing task and responsibility of an individual, an institution, or an organization. Edison's mission and purpose was defined as to bring electrical appliances and electrical energy to the world. That was his mission, that was his purpose. Now, there's some keys to mission and purpose that may kind of surprise you. If I were to ask you, what is your mission and purpose with this program you've purchased? What is your mission and purpose here? You may come back and respond to me with, I want, or I would like, because that's a common answer I find in questioning audiences for the last 25 years. Because we want to always focus on ourselves. But in this case, mission and purpose, and it's a rule, is always provided in the adversary's world to their benefit, with no benefit, money, or influence or power to us. I want to say that again. This is a rule. A valid mission and purpose can only be written in the adversary's world, remember, respected opponent, to their benefit. Nothing in return to us. Now, we're going to talk about preparation later on, and you're going to find there's a place for what you want, absolutely. But for right now, I want you to clear your mind and think this through with me. Edison's mission and purpose was to bring electrical energy and appliances to the world. He saw the value of all of it. So what drove his decisions as he brought this forward? Well, his vision of what he wanted to deliver to the world drove his decision to get the light bulb involved. He believed that the world would see the benefits of electrical energy quickly through the light bulb. So here's what he did. He invested his own dollars and built dynamos in New York City. Actually built dynamos to develop electrical energy. He paid for and wired a full city block of New York and hooked his dynamos up to that full city block of New York. And then, once the light bulb was effective enough and developed enough, he turned on that city block. And he created a vision for the world of what electrical energy could do, all driven by his mission and purpose. Hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars were invested, difficult decisions were made, all driven by his mission and purpose. Now, you know that what came out of that mission and purpose was General Electric. We bring good things to life. That's the legacy Thomas Edison left with mission and purpose. But let's dig into this a little further and do some grandiose thought-provoking things here, and let's talk about Winston Churchill. I've studied Winston Churchill heavily. What was Winston Churchill's mission and purpose when the war began with Germany? His mission and purpose was to save the free world. Think of the decisions that were made. Think of the decisions that were difficult. Do we invade Europe? Do we invade Africa? How many troops will we need? How will we build the alliances required? That mission and purpose, that vision of saving the free world from tyranny and the black, if you will, the black ugly horror of Nazi Germany. Think of the decisions that were taking place with Winston Churchill. What was his mission and purpose in giving his speeches on the BBC? I have a set of those recordings that I bought in London, and you can hear his mission and purpose ring true in those speeches. Maybe you remember the one, we'll fight them on the beaches, we'll fight them on the landing grounds, we'll fight them in the fields. He created vision for all the listeners to share his mission and purpose. Lincoln at Gettysburg, in a very few words, eloquently gave our country a mission and purpose that would eventually bring the country back together. It would also change the way we looked at government from that day forward, driven by mission and purpose. Horace Greeley, once a publisher of the newspaper in New York, loved to attack Lincoln and wanted to know Lincoln's purpose, and this letter's well published. And Lincoln responded with, if you would ask my intent, my purpose, it would be to unite the Union. If I could do that by freeing the slaves, I would. If I could do that without freeing the slaves, I would. Any decision I would make would be to unite the Union. That's my purpose. So, mission and purpose drives our decisions and how we make our decisions with our vision. It gives us a path. Now think back to our definition of negotiation. The human effort to bring about agreements between two or more parties, with all parties having the right to veto. When you're asked to do something that goes against your mission, your purpose, or that would interfere with your mission, your purpose, that mission and purpose is going to be driven by that decision, and you may have to veto. You may have to say, I'm sorry, I can't do that. In fact, I'll actually let you down if I do that, because your mission and purpose is to their benefit. They may not see it, that's your job. But mission and purpose will drive those decisions, and it fits perfectly with our definition, and it fits perfectly with the neuroscience of decision-making, which again, we'll talk about a little later on in detail. Mission and purpose is going to become your foundation. Think about the giant events of your lifetime, and you'll start to realize that every endeavor of great magnitude was driven by a mission and purpose. Do you remember Kennedy's quest to put us on the moon by the end of the decade? How's that for a mission? In the military, I flew missions. We had mission briefings. We knew our long-term aim. We knew our overall mission and purpose for that launch of the aircraft. And then, when we got back, we would debrief how well we did on that mission. So, mission and purpose is going to become the anchor that's going to be the root of everything you do in negotiations. Now, let's talk about mission and purpose, and let's talk about how you build one. It's pretty tough when you think of it. When we're talking about long-term aim, continuing task and responsibility of an individual, organization, institution, of a country for that matter, and think about the lack of mission and purpose that you see all around you. If you and I could sit down together and talk today and spend 2 or 3 hours, I could help you discover all the failings around us. People say we're giving this country away. Why are we giving this country away? Well, there's numerous reasons, as you know. One of them, of course, is the mindset of compromise being required. We make logical decisions, we believe, which are false. But if you really think about why people say we give this country away, in many cases, industry, society, individuals are not functioning with a mission and purpose. It's void from their negotiations. It's the greatest weakness in the environment of negotiation. It could become your greatest strength if you can change your mindset from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. But we have to build a mission and purpose. It has to be to our adversary's benefit. It can bring nothing to us. So how do we do that? Well, everything on the planet, every thought has a feature and it has a benefit. Let me give you an example. I have a coffee cup here at the table in front of me. It's a ceramic coffee cup. That's a feature, ceramic. It's a coffee cup, for goodness sakes. What's the benefit? Well, there may be a couple. It holds 12 ounces instead of 8, so it gives me a large enough quantity I don't have to refill very often. That's a benefit. It tends to keep the coffee hot, which is the way I like it. That's a benefit. It has a nice big handle. My hands are fairly large, so it's comfortable for my hands to hold. That's a benefit. Now, the feature to that holding, of course, is the handle. Now, I know I'm being ridiculously simple here, but this, by the way, will be the hardest thing you will ever take on to get this right. Learning how to build a valid mission and purpose is the most valuable thing you'll ever do. It's going to be the hardest thing you ever do. And we're going to dig into this when we get into preparation. But for right now, let me give you an example. Just recently, I coached a team of attorneys and chief of human resources at a $2 billion company, and it was a termination of a very high-level individual who had failed to perform. A lot of visibility to the company, a lot of visibility to the area, the city the company was in, just a lot of potential visibility. Very important. Let me set the stage for you. So this person had been let go. I'll use that term rather than fired. They'd been relieved of their duties. When they were relieved of the duties, the human resource specialist came up with a severance offer of 6 months' pay. Now, this young lady that was separated from the company was offended. She felt that she hadn't been given a chance. She felt that the company had, in many other cases, allowed people to move to other positions to remain with the company and keep their career. This young lady had moved with her family, brought her family, her husband and children, from Las Vegas, Nevada, to this city they were now in. The husband had resigned his career in Las Vegas to come to this position with her, and he was struggling to find employment. So there are a lot of emotional factors involved in this situation. When she rejected the severance offer from the human resources person, now human resources, that person's offended and very emotional about this. Now think about what tools they have to deal with this, based on conventional wisdom today of win-win. All they have is compromise in their mind. They're locked to compromise. Well, the CEO who I coach, and I coach a lot of very large negotiations in this organization, but a lot of people have no visibility to me. They don't even know I exist. But the CEO's concerned that this becomes so visible it could really tarnish the image. So he calls me and said, "Jim, please help our chief legal counsel, who I've worked with before, to solve this." Now we have a head of human resources and 4 attorneys and myself on the telephone. And so I listened to the debriefing, and I hear that she has a $2 million demand on the table. She's threatened a lawsuit of sexual harassment, of various legal terms that I won't even dig into. And so the threat is very real. Not only that, the very attorneys from the company I'm working with feel that there may be a case for a jury that this company hasn't done enough in working with women in leadership positions, and that it was very heavily weighted with male leadership. So they were just very afraid. The visions they were conjuring up as we discussed this were really kind of off the chart. And so they asked me if I had enough information, and I said, well, yes, we do. So let me ask you, what's our mission? What's our purpose here? And the human resources lady, who's been offended by this lady's rejection, by the way, blurted out, it doesn't matter. We just got to get her off our backs and out of our hair. Our mission and purpose is to get this done today. Well, that's an example of our world, what we want. Is it even feasible? Is this that simple? Can anybody have a magic wand to make this go away? The other 3 attorneys said, well, look, Jim, every case is different. we have no long-term aim here after I'd explained the definition. We have no long-term aim. We have no responsibility other than to get this out of our hair as quickly as possible. So I'm up against 4 people with a mindset driven by fear, logic, and compromise. That's all they have. So I asked a few questions. And I asked the question, well, why don't we adapt this mission and purpose? Let me just give it to you and see what you think of this. How about we provide, I'm going to use the name Betty, not the real name. Why don't we provide Betty the opportunity to discover that her future could be easily secured in this area in another position by allowing a severance package that boosts that opportunity? And I asked them to write that down. So we stayed there for a while. And then I said, what's the problem we face? And the whole group immediately transitioned back to their fear and their compromised positions. One attorney said, I think we could settle this for $750,000. Now realize that severance package was $138,000. He already jumped to $750,000 in compromise. The HR leader said, I'm not sure that'll do it. I know her. She's very aggressive. I'm sure the attorney's working on a fee that he gets to share in the reward once they get to us. This could be a couple $1 million award to her by a jury. I think we ought to really please her with $1 million. I think that would make her happy. Notice the words, I think. Remember we talked earlier about theory of mind and assumptions, thinking we know what another person would do. Lo and behold, another attorney said, no, I think we ought to only offer her $500,000. So everyone is groping. Now the chief legal officer steps forward and allowed the team to voice himself, and I really appreciated that because I think it helped. And the chief legal counsel said, stop, let's go back. Coach, he calls me Coach. Coach, what would you recommend? I said, well, let's go back to the mission and purpose. She's going to make her decisions emotionally with vision. What's our mission and purpose say? We want to provide her the opportunity to discover moving forward with her career in this city in a positive, reasonable fashion. I believe we should stay there. They said, well, what would you do? Well, I think the real problem is that we don't know what Betty sees. And our CEO has offered to support her efforts in a new career in this very city. This is a very powerful company inside this city. It's perceived as a great company. That's one of the reasons I'm with you. And the problem is we don't know what value she puts upon that because she doesn't know he's willing to do that. So why isn't our next step to help her discover what he's willing to do so that she can determine what value that might have for her and her family? And she can surely reject it. She can absolutely reject what we offer to her. So I would suggest that Tracy, who is dealing with Betty, say this. I would suggest that she say, Betty, I think I've failed to help you really discover what's in your severance package. Are you aware that our CEO would like to support you in your efforts in the city to get a new career? I think I failed to tell you that he's willing to provide not only written support, but take calls from other CEOs and other companies and talk about your capabilities and what you could do for them. Now, Betty, what I would like to propose is this, and you can say no to this. Remember our definition of negotiation, and she has the right to veto. Betty, you can say no to this. I don't want you to feel pressure over this. But what we propose is that you take your severance package of $138,000, that's 6 months. And remember, that includes insurance, COBRA for your family. That includes private school for that 6 months for your daughter and your pay. And we also propose that our CEO support you as required to help you. Now, you can reject that. Now, honestly, I hope you'll embrace it. And what I would like to see is, if it's okay with you, if you would just call me and give us your decision next Monday, then we can go from there. Now, of course, the attorneys, other than the chief counsel, were silent. And they said, well, what happens if she doesn't take it? And my response as a coach is, it doesn't matter. We're safe. She has the right to say no. And then we'll work with our mission and purpose and try to move this thing forward and see if we can discover what she really requires. But the negotiation isn't going to end with her saying no. It's just going to begin. And they were kind of nonplussed. They'd never heard of such a thing. And a lady in charge of human resources actually attacked me. It wasn't good enough for her. She wanted this done today, and she didn't care how much it cost. And that's when the chief legal counsel said, whoa, wait a minute. The reason Coach is here is because we don't want to pay something exorbitant. Not only is it we don't want to pay the money, we want the money for the company, but we also don't want to set a precedent within this company and in the community that you can just sue us at the drop of a hat. I would really like this executed, and let's see what happens on Monday. But I want to go back to what drove that whole discussion with the attorneys and the head of human resources. That was driven by mission and purpose. What are the features, what are the benefits that drove that mission and purpose? It's the communication spoken and the letter. That's the feature, and the benefit is that a good light is cast upon her as a future employee for another company. Well, the result was kind of interesting. On Monday of this week, she accepted $138,000, all driven by mission and purpose. Mission and purpose and your ability to develop one is going to be the most important single factor you're going to gather from this session. I hope you'll pay close attention to it. There are 6 characteristics I want to talk with you now about that are required for peak performance in a human performance event like negotiation. I hope you'll listen to them over and over again and push back on each one, because discovery of these 6 will help you greatly as you try and work your way through changing your world of negotiation. These will serve you well as you work to gain great success in your negotiations. Now let's talk about where these 6 come from. And you can disagree with any 6 anytime. You can say no to any of these. But let me tell you where they come from. They came from the great European armies, all the way back to Attila the Hun. And what they are the 6 human requirements that you should work to improve on every day. Every disciplined organization in the world has a list like this. Now, I didn't invent this list. I actually got this list from the Continental Army's manual that George Washington put together. This list is actually now taught at the military academies here in the United States and in many academies around the world. But I want you to really dig into this. Now, the first characteristic that I really want you to think about, and if you never get anything else from this program, if you can get this will absolutely pay you dividends. Pass this on to your family, your loved ones, your children, your friends, your associates. Number 1 on the list is effective decision making. We must work every day to be more effective in our decisions. Now, we know our decisions are driven by vision. And so it's very important that we work every day to envision, to see, to make great decisions. The only responsibility we have in life, if you really boil it down, are the decisions we make. Now think about this for a moment. When we make a decision, what happens to us? What happens to our brain? Our emotions calm and we get teed up for the next decision. It's when we don't make decisions that we vacillate, that we lose opportunities. The beauty of being an effective decision maker, if you make an ineffective decision, but you are effective in working on your decisions, what will you do? You'll make another decision to try to correct it. I learned flying airplanes that there's no such thing as a perfect flight. You're constantly correcting for decisions that were made. Constantly making decisions, correcting. Maybe a change of course, a slight change of altitude, a slight change of throttle setting. Decisions, decisions, decisions. Decisions calm the mind. I want to tell you a story. I think this will help you. Many years ago, in a T-38 in pilot training, the T-38 was a supersonic trainer. And I remember my first flight in a T-38. It was a familiarization flight, they called it. And the instructor in the back did all the flying. All I had to do was observe to see what was going on. I wasn't required to make any decisions. And as I sat there at the end of the runway, he kind of talked me through what he was doing. Now, to put this in perspective for you, the T-38 accelerated from 0 to 10,000 feet of altitude in 9 seconds. I know that's hard to believe, but can you envision looking down the runway? The instructor says, afterburner's full. You make the decision to look at the instruments to show that they're lit. You release the brakes. You accelerate to 155 knots in a second or two. You raise the nose 5 degrees. As soon as you hit the 5-degree mark, you raise the gear, you raise the flaps, and you stand throttles to idle, and you're going through 7,000 feet that fast. How can the mind work that fast? How could I ever make decisions? I was so emotional. I was lost. I was in a fog. I was glazed over. I couldn't make a decision. 3 weeks later, I took off in that airplane by myself and did that. My brain caught up. Now, there's a whole neuroscience behind that we'll spend some time on a little later on. But those decisions, when we make them and we learn to make them, are calming, and they give us the opportunity to do things we can't imagine. Number 2, we talked earlier about mission and purpose, but I want you to think about if we're effective enough to build a valid mission and purpose that enhances our decision-making, we're giving ourselves every opportunity to support number 1 and be more effective in our decision-making. So number 2 is building mission and purpose statements. It almost becomes a thought process. We spend our time thinking in terms of what's my mission, what's my purpose in this discussion? What am I trying to provide to, or what am I delivering? What am I bringing? So mission and purpose is number 2. Number 3, and I'm going to spend a little time on this with you. The word goal is terribly overused and misused in society. Remember back in behaviors, we talked about the word need and how we program our mind, and we suddenly discover it's death. That if we don't achieve what we think we need, we actually program our subconscious. Well, think of how we use the word goal. Well, my goal is to make $1 million. Is that a valid goal? How do we think? If my goal is to make $1 million, can I do that? Can I control the results of someone else writing me a check or a group of people writing a check to me that equal $1 million? Can I control those decisions? Can I manage those? A goal must be manageable. What can we manage? We can manage 2 things, and we talked about this before. We can manage our activity habits, what we do with the 24 hours in a day, and we can manage by habit how we behave. We covered that in behaviors. We talked about that. Remember, we talked about the activity of taking copious notes in our negotiations to quiet our little mind, to blank slate, like Mark Teixeira does when he hits a home run for the Yankees. Goals must be manageable. So we set activity goals and we set behavior goals. Now, when we set those 2 goals, we achieve something very important. And let me see if I can help you discover this. By taking that activity and that behavior, we can accomplish objectives. Another misused word. What is an objective? It's something that once achieved can be used again and again to forward our long-term aim. Now, I want to go back just a second and give you the definition of goal. A goal is defined by Webster's as an action to an end. An action to an end. That's what we do with our activity. That's what we do with our behavior. We set a goal, we perform, it ends. But once we achieve an objective, we can use it again and again for 2 purposes. 1, we can forward our mission and purpose. And 2, we can use it to support our 4th characteristic. But I want to spend a little time on objective to be sure you see it. 12 years ago, I wrote a book called Start With No. It took me a year. So my activity goal on a daily basis was to spend a certain amount of time, and I would set an activity goal to write and work on the book. And then I would set a behavioral goal to ask myself questions for clarity of what I was writing before I sent it to the editor. That took me a year of activity goals and behavior goals. But I also had a series of objectives achieved. For example, when the introduction was completed, that was objective number 1, and it supported my mission and purpose. And it also contributed to number 4, my plan, which we'll talk about in a moment. So I had a series of activity goals and behavior goals to achieve an objective. When I finished chapter 1 and it was blessed by my editor, that was the second objective achieved. Eventually, when the book was completed, the overall mission and purpose was accomplished. Now, what happened to my mission and purpose? It changed. I changed from a person under the radar, out of sight of the public, no one even knew I was there, and my mission and purpose overall changed to impact a much larger audience. And so we started all over again. Now, number 4 is plan. And what's interesting to me, so many times people don't build a plan, they don't think in terms of plan, but there's one key rule to planning, and the plan must solve the real problem in a priority order. What's the one biggest problem to be solved first by the plan? What's the second biggest problem to be solved by the plan? What's the third? So we need to prioritize what the real problems are that our plan is going to solve. We may, as we evaluate our plan, we may have to go back to our goals and objectives and adjust them. But that's okay, they belong to you. But I promise you that if you're making effective decisions, you're focused on mission and purpose that's valid, and if you're working with goals and objectives that are valid, and if you're trying to solve the real problem in your planning, number 5 becomes very easy. Number 5 is laser-like focus. We must keep our eye on the ball. How many times have you heard someone say, keep your eye on the ball? Focus. 5 is developing laser-like focus. Now, number 6, for years, I used the word trainability as the number 6 characteristic. Critical to our long-term success, trainability. But neuroscience, which we'll talk about later, changed that for me. And they changed it to growth mindset, always looking for more, better. One of the things I love about working with my CEOs and my chairmen of boards, they're very hungry for new, better. They don't get locked into a fixed mindset of knowing it all in any way. They're always willing to listen. They're always willing to dig into something if they can see it has merit. So how much growth mindset you have is critical to your success. This program is an example of how you'll respond to growth mindset. Or will you stick with your fixed mindset and be so proud of your BATNA? That's a major question. I also add coachability to this because I have a lot of coaches in my life. I'm very coachable. And I think that that's a great, great characteristic to have. So I kind of blend those two in number 6. But let me recap for you these 6 characteristics. And I assure you, you can build a great organization with just these as you travel forward and expand. You can absolutely achieve negotiating success you never imagined with these 6 characteristics. First, effective decision maker. Every day, we strive to become a more effective decision maker. Don't put things off. Don't procrastinate. Make effective decisions. If you don't make a great decision, make another one and change it. Number 2, mission and purpose. And remember, this is going to be the hardest yet most valuable thing you'll ever add to your track to success in negotiations and life for that matter. Mission and purpose. Remember, it has to be in the adversary's world to their benefit, not to you. Goals and objectives. Goals and objectives must be manageable. Think of the Little League ball player, that as you coach them, the activity goal is to make a good swing of the bat. The behavioral goal is to blank the mind. Think in terms that you can put your arms around and grab a hold of. Objectives. Once you've achieved an objective, you can use it again and again to forward your long-term aim and your plan. In the military, you'll hear things like, our objective is air superiority. You'll hear infantry terms like, our objective is to take the high ground like they did with the Union Army at Gettysburg. Having that high ground assured their long-term success if they held on. Remember, plan solves the real problem, and the beauty of all this is, If you're an effective decision maker, you can always change your mission and purpose. You can always change your goals and objectives. You can always change your plan. It belongs to you. Focus. There is no such thing as multitasking. I don't believe in it. There's laser-like focus, and there's effective decision making. And lastly, growth mindset. The great ones have it. All the great people you could study in this history of humanity, you'll see they have a growth mindset. And they're coachable. They listen. They want input. Now, will they always agree with you? Of course not. But that's what it's all about as far as coaching is concerned. This will serve you well. Grab on to these 6 characteristics. Give them to everyone you care about.
This view is everything. Shit, I could get used to this. That's right. You can see a lot more when you're standing on the top floor.